Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The Psychiatrist. I closed my eyes, ignoring the loud courtroom around me. Smacking of a woman in the back's gum chewing, fast typing of computer, closing and opening of doors in the back of the already full room. Clicking of photos being taken, yelling of lawyers arguing, banging of Judge Lewis's gavel hitting the hollow wooden desk. How did I get there? How did one misstep cause me to be the one standing there awaiting death or life imprisonment? No matter what I chose, it was the end for me. So couldn't I have given up instead of going down screaming? No, I couldn't have, because that wasn't me. I heard the judge's raspy voice echo across the small courtroom. "Silence," he hollered. The whole room followed his instructions and went dead silent. "Miss Davis, I will ask once more," the judge sighed in a strained but steady voice. "How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?" His voice faded slowly, like he was on edge. I paused, still holding my eyes securely shut. His strained, groggy voice gave me the feeling he was tired, angry, annoyed, and possibly sad. The way his jaw moved very gently and seemed clenched, even when he spoke, was a curious realization. Though when he did speak, normally, his voice was slow and dull, which was pretty normal for someone his age. But still, I knew something was wrong. He had a small wedding band on his right hand that was slightly rusted around the edges. Married for 30 years at least. He had bruises covered by a tattoo on the back of his same hand, which I noticed immediately after. It was new, practically 3 days old. Gone, but never forgotten. It read next to a small signature. I thought back more to the tattoo. JLJ, the signature read. Was it short for John Lewis Jr., the judge's son? The judge was grieving, not tired. He seemed so gloomy. I leaned my back against my chair, only to feel a soft vibration. So I listened. A uniformed officer behind me was tapping her foot on the floor quickly. Not normally, though. It was like she had somewhere to be. Nevertheless, it wasn't enough information to know for sure. Officer Howard had walked me in there, so I must have seen more. I remembered the way she walked, with a small limp on her left side. And when I asked her what courtroom we were going to, she responded angrily, like she was frustrated with a simple question. During the entire opening remarks, I kept hearing her heartbeat in the silence, and it was beating fast. But why was that? Was she nervous? Perhaps anxiety? No, that wouldn't explain the limp. That's it, I thought. Pain meds. She was taking them for her knee, but they were causing an addiction. She needed to see a doctor to get more, and that is why she was checking her watch so often. I took a deep breath to try and refocus on the judge's question, but I couldn't. I took a big whiff of my lawyer, Maxwell Hartley's cologne. It was strong, to say it best, but why was that? Other days, he'd come in with no smell, so why was today different? I pictured his frame leaning against the door in the hallway during our recess. He was a tall guy, 6'4", and his energy followed that. Every day, he came into work with a kind smile and a good morning for everyone. But he hadn't in a few weeks. He wasn't bad looking either, with his short, dark brown hair and even darker brown eyes. But alas, he wore a wedding ring when we first met. That was until a month ago when I noticed it off, and he never mentioned anything. I remembered back to the morning when he left abruptly at 10 o'clock on the dot and returned at exactly 10:15. Later, at around 1 o'clock, he did the same and came back at 1:15 again. Coincidence? No, nothing in our world is. So, what could he be doing that took 10 minutes? Immediately, a conversation I had with my therapist friend came up where she mentioned 15 minutes on the phone talking about common interests is an exercise for troubled couples. This means that Hartley was having marital problems. The judge coughed, and I jumped. I regained focus and slowly opened my sore eyes to adjust to the light. Shouldn't have I just ended this? Stopped at all the suffering I caused everyone, and just admitted to it. They all have places to be. So why couldn't I just say, yeah, I did it? 4 stupidly simple words I couldn't get out of my mouth. Why didn't I think I did anything? I did. I killed so many people. I can admit it now, but what was wrong with me then? I'm a psychiatrist. I should be able to tell what is wrong with people with the slightest movement. But in this case, I can't, and I don't know why. The entire trial, I had no feeling in me. It's like I was turning into someone else. I felt no remorse for killing 17 people. And yeah, sure it was out of my hands. But I still was caught red-handed prescribing medication people never even needed just to make a profit. I just don't understand it all. I have studied the brains body languages, and emotions of thousands of people for most of my life. Yet somehow, I can't find out why or what happened to me. I was a good person before all of this. I had friends, an amazing career, a life, and a family. So how could one bad decision make me want to drive that all away? The answer, you may be wondering, I will never be able to give. I shot out of my chair fiercely. Not guilty, Your Honor. The whole courtroom gasped out loud. I plead not guilty. When the world went gray. Prologue. Joy, happiness, life, creation, the spark of beginning, the heartbeat of earth itself, the endless manifestation of color and beauty and light, blossoming, growing, unfurling into something infinite. And then, one day, nothing. The world, once bursting with radiance, was swallowed whole, devoured by an oblivion so complete that even memory faded to grayscale, leaving behind only the cruel, inescapable taunt of black and white, a silent mockery of what once was, shadows of what had been clung to the charred land beyond our shelter, reaching with desperate fingers toward a sky that had long since turned its back. And as the relentless nothingness took and took and took, we were left only to bear witness, to suffer in the empty remains of what we had destroyed. And as the world faded to monochrome, I became one of the countless shades of despair. Our city, once flooded with bustling citizens driving cars of every color, is reduced skeletal frames of buildings and cracked roads. A cruel reminder of the countless nights I spent, sleepless, hidden away in my attic, thriving off the colors coating my paint palette. The word around us hasn't just been burned, it's been erased, the vibrancy stripped away. I look around our underground shelter, and for people struggling to survive, everyone was perfectly content with making conversation from the concrete where they sat, as if they weren't on their deathbeds. We scrape by with the rations the leaders distribute weekly, our bodies weakened by hunger, our minds fractured by the unbearable monotony of a world without color. But it isn't the hunger or paranoia that haunts us, but the weight of absence, the memories of color fading with each passing, dissolving to add to the torture of the ash flakes contaminating the air. Black, white, gray, repeat, every damn time. And then I find myself thinking the same, though I thought since the day the world was drained of color. This is a dream. Colors can't just disappear. And yet, here we were, in this mere sketch of what was a vast land that stretched on through the remains of the nuclear tragedy, colored in shades of ash and bone, where nothing grows and nothing dares to blossom. For now, I resort to my only escape, my eyelids suddenly feeling too heavy, my mind too weary. Symptoms we've long since accepted as the norm, and allow myself to relax against the concrete wall. Part 1. Rations are low. Too low. A small group of us was sent into the depths of our despair to scrounge together enough food to ensure our, at the least, survival. Survival doesn't always grace the entirety of our measly society, and it's unfortunate. But death, even at 17, is not an unfamiliar fate. I look out into the rubble, finally lifting my eyes from my sneakered feet for the first time since they stepped beyond the shelter's entrance. The land is silent. The only sound, the crunching of boots landing against who knows what, and the whipping wind nipped at my skin, scattering my once auburn-streaked hair across the back of my jacket. Black, white, gray, rep. A gleam catches my eye. We're at the edge of the ruins. That's impossible. My feet are already betraying me, already venturing closer to this foreign feeling of freedom. 5 years ago was the last time I was graced with the presence of color. 5 years since the bombs. 5 years since this world was diminished to a mere grayscale. 5 years. For color to still exist would be out of the question. I track the glistening spark of hope, forcing my eyes to stay open, forcing my feet one in front of the other, until, where'd it go? I blink. Scanning the scene, my eyes dart frantically from each piece of Colorly's scrap to the next. Come on. Come on. Come. Nothing. The unmistakable feeling of wilted grass prickles at my knees as they hit the ground where it was. The hope of color in an achromatic world slipped through my hoary fingers like sand slipping through the grasp of the ocean's spray continuously. Elara? Sienna, one of the other young scavengers asked, kneeling down in front of me. You okay? I blink back tears I didn't know were welling, forcing composure I don't have, even as I feel the feather-light touch of Sienna's hand on my shoulder. I know I can tell Sienna the truth. She did take me in after the bombs killed my parents, but to burden her would be to break myself in the process. Yeah, my voice is breathy, as if I'm questioning my own answer, while letting the first one that comes to mind slip past my lips. If anyone is going to believe me, it's going to be her. She is the only family I have left, after all. I thought I saw color. Sienna's muted, but still striking. Once blue eyes go wide, clawing to clench onto the sliver of hope and clinging onto it like a lifeline. Anything, everything. She leans closer, the shoulder-length, ashy hue filling her head, now slipping past her ear. If anyone can find it, it's you. She said it like it was the easiest thing in the world. But that was just the way Sienna made everything seem. Easy. Like it wasn't the sight reignites a desperate hope, a longing to believe that life in its fullest form is not truly gone. Part 2. I can't pretend like it didn't happen. I can't unsee it. I know it's risky. I know there are people here who need every last bit of help they can get. But if there's a better, beautifully vivid world out there, inching to be found, it needs to be found. So here I am, in the thick, inky embrace of the dead of night, my fingers curling tightly around the worn, chilled rungs of the ladder that stretches upward like a fragile, rust-bitten bridge to a world I have long since sworn, with every fiber of my being, to unravel, to tear apart piece by piece, if that's what it takes, all in pursuit of that elusive, flickering glint, something small, something distant, something that once dared to catch and hold the fleeting light of a bleached and weary sun. Because if there is one truth I refuse to let slip through the cracks of time, it is that color, in all its wild, untamed brilliance, is not just an indulgence, not merely an ornament to be admired from afar, but a necessity, a lifeblood that the world not only craves, but deserves to be drenched in, to be wholly consumed by. And if it is within my grasp to bring it back, to pry it from the hands of whatever force dares to smother it, then I will chase it, seize it, and deliver it without hesitation, no matter the cost. Singed, sealed, delivered. Address: a monochrome world once called Earth, surrounded by rubble. I step out into the spotted sky and let the chill of a rare wind smack me right in the face, a stark contrast to the warmth seeping across my chest. I shake my head at myself and how I utterly disregarded the warnings of the other survivors, and so effortlessly snuck out of the security of our shelter into the wasteland so eagerly. I glance around the land stretched out before me, waste crowding the ground and ashes polluting the air. And I swear the hues of gray, now illuminated by stars and a moon, that appeared as dots and a waning semicircle, were darker than black, everything meshing with the ink-stained sky. I will find it. I'll find it, if it kills me. I will. Then, just beyond the endless stretch of night, a shimmer, the faintest trace of warmth against the cold monotony. It's real, I murmur, though no one is around to overhear. It has to be Part 3. I walk for hours, and it still feels like I've gone nowhere. I'm still surrounded by the gray void, still surrounded by remains of a better life, and still with the shimmering speck of hope before me, not stopping. The landscape is an endless graveyard of the past. Twisted steel, collapsed buildings, and roads that crack beneath my feet stretch on like the bones of a forgotten civilization. Everything is still. No birds cry overhead. No wind whispers through trees. Because there are no trees left to whisper through. The silence is heavy, pressing against me like the weight of the sky itself. I huff, pressing my back against a crumbling door, not bothering to look at the house, but rather the swing set across the road, peering intently as it swings back and forth in the stillness of night, moved by something unseen. Perhaps the ghost of the child who cherished it. A sigh slips past my lips at the tempting offer of sleep, but refusing to give in quiet yet, I push my weight forward. My feet drag, weighing me down. Black, white, great repeat. It's infuriating that I can't close the distance between me and my last hope of color. My eyes snag on a reflection in the road. My pace quickens. My footfalls echo in the empty, colorless world as I near the glinting surface. A mirror, cracked, dirt-speckled, abandoned in the middle of the road, like it doesn't belong. Like nothing belongs, I slow, breathing hard. My reflection stares back at me, distorted by the fractures spider-webbing across the glass. The same dull world is behind me, the same lifeless sky above. But beneath me, just beyond the cracks, something else, green, my breath catches. A patch of grass, impossibly vivid, bleeding through the reflection, as if it exists in another world, as if it's real, somewhere, somehow. I step forward, heart pounding, kneeling at the mirror's edge. My fingers hover over the glass. The colors look too bright, too alive, like they'd burn if I touched them. But I don't hesitate. I kick the mirror. It shatters under my heel with a sharp, crystalline crack. Splinters of glass scatter across the road, glinting like stars in the empty light. I brace myself for something, anything, a shift in the air, a tremor in the ground, a door opening where there was none before. But when I look down, the green is gone, just shards of broken glass, catching the darkened sky in their edges. Just my own reflection, fractured into 100 jagged pieces. I lurch forward, scraping at the road where the mirror used to be. Nothing. No hidden portal. No sliver of color left behind. My hands shake. Tears, clear wetness, drip down my cheeks in slowed fashion. My breathing comes in clipped gasps. I saw it. I know I did. The wind stirs, sending a few stray fragments skittering away. I watch them disappear down the road, swallowed by the nothingness stretching endlessly ahead. And then I keep walking, pushing harder, further, relentless. Part 4. I refuse to let myself stop. I won't. I can't. Not if I want any chance at finding the color I've recklessly craved. My eyes follow the path I left in the dust, the sun rising higher in the sky. And then, thunk, the ground hits me before I can brace for it. Pain shoots through my skull in sharp, electric volts. I glance up, dazed, and see the thick trunk of the tree I just slammed into. Its rough bark pressing into my chest, pinning me to the earth. I wince, trying to push myself up, but my head swims with dizziness. The tree stands tall, towering over me like an ancient sentinel, its branches casting long shadows in the early morning light. I can feel its strength, as if it's mocking my weakness, daring me to rise again. I press my palms to the ground, leaves crunching beneath them, and accept this tree's challenge. The rough earth presses against my skin, grounding me in this moment, daring me to rise. A chill runs through my spine as I push myself up, dirt clinging to my fingertips. The air is thick, damp, charged with something unseen but undeniable. Prepared to confront the tree, I stand to my feet and ball my fists, the tension in my body coiling like a spring. I'm ready. My knuckles tighten, breath steadying, until a sharp, almost imperceptible sting pricks at my palm. Crunch. My hand flattens instinctively, fingers twitching as I feel the sensation spread. The leaves, crisp and brittle, stick to my skin like they belong there. A brief annoyance flickers through me, and I almost brush them off without a second thought, until something stops me cold. The color, not gray, not black, not the dry, lifeless husks of darkness. These leaves are green. It's faint, fading, dying, but it's there. The realization steals the breath from my lungs. Green here, among the decay. Color still exists, but it is fading. The world is not truly black and white. It is dying in slow motion. The nuclear bombs did not erase color. It severed life's connection to it, leaving only those who remember it to witness its vanishing. A smirk, one I haven't worn since the day of the bombs, breaks across my lips. It all makes sense. I have to find the color. I have to find the... What about everyone else? What about Sienna? I cut myself off, bending to gather a handful of dull leaves from the ground. Sienna would want this. If anyone can find it, it's you. My grip on the leaves tightens as if I can hold on to her words, onto her for guidance like I always have, and I intend to do just that. One step for hope, another for faith, 2 steps for a new life, another for Sienna, and then I'm sprinting, not daring to look back. Finn, flight, 24/7. It's strange how the most pivotal moments of our lives often begin in the most mundane places. For me, it's the cramped bathroom of Trans-Pacific Flight 1247, 35,000 feet above sea level, when the first tremor rips through the cabin. At this moment, I'm just another passenger with a spike of anxiety from the turbulence we just experienced, making the smart faucet in the bathroom require all of my focus, completely oblivious to the fact that fate has begun its countdown. Why does everything always come down to timing? 5 minutes earlier, and I would have been safely strapped into PODEC, connected to my assigned neural interface, already synced to the emergency protocols. The bathroom mirror catches my reflection as the cabin lights shift from institutional LED 2A to a pulsing amber hue. My heart stutters. I know that color. How people used to fly in these things before EES came around, I'll never understand. They were basically flying in an air-conditioned metal tub with wings. Everyone that flies on Trans-Pacific knows that color. Catastrophic system failure, and the emergency evacuation system has begun. In the old days, this would have meant certain death. But in 2147, commercial aircrafts have evolved from their fragile predecessors. The Airbus Quantum Aeroline doesn't just fly. They adapt, transform, and when necessary, shed their parts like a snake shedding its skin. I lunge for the door. One of the only remaining places on board that doesn't have its own EES protocols. My fingers slipping on the handle, slick from the soapy water that just cleansed my skin of any dirt, germs, and other microorganisms that I collected while on board. My savior might be my demise, I say out loud to myself, spurring myself into hurried movements, wiping my hands down my shirt, hoping to gain more traction on the door handle. Fuck! I scream as the handle and door refuse to move. The status light begins blinking an infuriating red as the message, "Door locked for catastrophic system failure protocol," scrolls across the ticker above the door lock. What usually tells passengers which water closet is in use is now taunting me with my impending fate. The first automated announcement over the intercom sends ice racing through my veins. My lungs are straining against my rib cage as I try to calm my panicked breathing. Attention, passengers. CSFP number 7 has been initiated. Please remain in your seats, in your designated pod. Quantum separation will begin in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. The word echoes around in my head, like a ball bouncing through a pinball machine. Under normal circumstances, that would be plenty of time for the pods to detach cleanly, their individual gravitational fields engaging as they descended safely to the nearest emergency landing zone. But I'm not in my pod, trapped in my tin can coffin, in the one section of the plane designed to stay with the main hull, the section that goes down with the ship. My mind whirs as I try to remember the schematics video they played at the beginning of our flight, the ones no one ever pays attention to because yada yada, remain in your pods and stay secured to your neural link for the most secure flight, yada yada. Trying not to think of how my sister had mocked me for even watching the video. You're such a germaphobe, I am sure you can make it one flight without washing your hands. It's only an hour-and-a-half flight, Nova, so she had drug my name out just to grate on my nerves. This bathroom is just between PRDRZ and PRDD. Only a sealed door and 20 feet separating me from my salvation. The neural link in my travel band is already buzzing frantically, trying to sync my pod. Another tremor, stronger this time. From the tiny crevice of a bathroom window, I catch a glimpse of PADA silently detaching, its edges alight with blue-green fire as its gravitational field adjusts to the atmosphere around it. Beautiful, yet terrifying. 2 minutes until quantum separation. The second automated announcement sounds over the intercom. 2 minutes. Think. There has to be a way out of here. My fingers trace the door's edge, feeling for there. A manual release panel, disguised as a part of the trim. The kind of backup system engineers include, but never expect anyone to actually use. I dig my nails into the seam and pull. The panel snaps off with a crack that sends me stumbling backwards. Behind the handle is a simple mechanical lever, a startling piece of analog technology for this quantum aeroline. I pull it down, instinctually throwing my body against the door. It bursts open with a pneumatic gasp, nearly sending me sprawling onto the floor. When my feet hit the smart polymer floor, I send up a silent prayer of thanks. The material has already started transforming, preparing for atmospheric re-entry, its texture shifting from a sleek, aesthetic design feature to a practical, high-traction surface designed for an emergency. In the distance, I hear the hydraulic hiss of PRD beginning its separation from the mainframe. That's when I see it. My salvation. Pansa-Z. I press my neural link band against PUDC's access panel, desperately hoping it will override the security protocols. Each buzz from the band feels like a rock dropping in my stomach. It rejects me once, twice. The authentication failures flashing across the display screen in angry red letters. 1 minute until quantum separation. 1 minute until quantum separation. The automated announcement taunts me over and over again. Panicking, I run my fingers over the screen, looking for anything to try. When in doubt, restart right? The thought flits through my mind. I use my fingers to pry open the panel cover, revealing a simple, glowing red button. Such an archaic solution, hiding in plain sight. A physical reset in a world of AI and neural commands. Slamming my hand against it, I pray to whatever gods might be listening that the oldest trick in the tech world will work one more time. 30 seconds until quantum separation. The announcement washes over me like a bucket of ice water. The walls of PODC begin to vibrate as the clamps begin to initiate their release sequence. The panel flickers from red to amber. The reset seems to have done something, not a full access grant, but a system reboot that might give me enough time. Emergency reset detected. System reinitialization in progress. The words flash across the access panel. I run. The door to PRD slides halfway open, then freezes, caught between evacuation and reboot protocols. Forcing my body through the gap, ignoring the sharp parts of the doorframe cutting into my clothes and skin, willing my body to get as small as possible. The system blares warnings through the pod speakers. Unauthorized entry detected. Security breach in PODC. Inside, the other passengers stare at me with a mixture of shock and confusion. The woman they had written off as collateral damage amongst the wreckage of this impending crash, defying both protocol and probability. The flight attendant assigned to our POD makes to move towards me, then hesitates as another announcement cuts through the chaos. 10 seconds until quantum separation. I dive into my seat. The neural interface recognizes my presence as soon as my hand hits the armrest. The familiar tingle of the neural link washes over me as the pod's systems integrate my biometrics into their separation calculations. For a moment, I think I can feel the algorithms adjusting, compensating for my return. My body sags with relief as my harness straps me into the pod. Did I damn us all with my return? The hunger, it happened overnight. One evening, the whole world was bathed in the rich hues of a setting sun. The sky painted in oranges and purples. The next morning, everything had turned gray. Not just dull or faded, color itself was gone. The trees, flowers, ocean, even people's skin and eyes had become mere variations of black, white, and gray. It was if reality had been drained, leaving behind a lifeless, monochrome wasteland. At first, scientists tried to explain it as some anomaly in human vision, a mass hallucination, an unknown pollutant in the air. But when they dissected plants and animals, their tissues were colorless at a molecular level. Screens, paintings, dyes, nothing could produce a single shade beyond the grayscale spectrum. Then, people started disappearing. It wasn't like normal vanishing. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. One moment, someone was there, and the next, gone, like they had been erased from existence. The only thing left behind was a faint, smudged shadow on the ground, as though they had begun to dissolve before vanishing entirely. Escher had been watching it happen for weeks. He kept a notebook where he marked every missing person in his town, tracking patterns, trying to make sense of it all. At first, the patterns were unclear, just a slow trickle of missing people. The painters, the poets, the dreamers, those who had dared to whisper about color, to grieve its absence, were the first to go. Then, it was the children who still dreamed in color, their small voices describing the impossible. A sky that wasn't gray, a sun that burned gold. Each one disappeared without a sound, leaving behind nothing but that eerie, smudged shadow. Now, Escher could feel it watching him, lingering just at the edge of his vision, a weight in the air that pressed against his skull, cold fingers at the nape of his neck. The more he thought about color, the stronger it became, like a slow, suffocating whisper wrapping around his mind. He had a theory, but it curdled in his stomach like rot. What if whatever took the color away was still here? And what if it didn't want anyone to remember what had been lost? Escher kept his theory to himself. He had seen too many people vanish after speaking too freely. But in the quiet of his apartment, under a single flickering bulb, he scrawled his thoughts into his notebook, pressing the pencil so hard against the paper that the tip snapped. That night, sleep came in restless waves. Dreams of golden sunrise, of green forests and sapphire oceans, flickered behind his closed eyelids. Something else lurked there too, a whispering void pressing at the edges of his vision, a presence that noticed him. He woke with a start, heart pounding. The bulb above him flickered more erratically now, casting sharp, jumping shadows across the walls. Then he saw it. A smudge, one of those gray stains on the floor near his desk. It hadn't been there before. It looked like the others, the ones left behind by the vanished. But he was still here. Escher reached out a shaking hand, brushing his fingers over the smudge. Ice shot up his arm. His breath hitched, his vision wavered, and for a split second, he saw something, a figure, a shifting mass of darkness standing in the corner of his room, featureless, faceless, but watching him, waiting. The moment passed, and he yanked his hand away. The thing was gone. but he knew it had been real. He flipped open his notebook with trembling fingers. If he was right, he had limited time before it came for him. He needed answers. Somewhere out there, someone knew the truth. Someone who was still alive. Escher didn't sleep again that night. He sat at his desk, staring at the smudge on his floor, waiting for it to move. It didn't, but something else did. A creak in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, his breath hitched. He lived alone. The sound came again, closer this time. A dragging shuffle, like bare feet sliding across wooden floors. Escher reached for the nearest object, a rusted letter opener. Pathetic, but it was something. He moved toward the door, silent, his pulse slamming against his ribs. He pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing. Then a whisper. Not words, just a sound. Something wrong. Like wind whistling through hollow bones. Escher yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the walls weren't. Long, uneven handprints streaked the wallpaper, dragging downward, as if something had clawed its way along. The air was thick, pressing, like he had stepped into a vacuum where sound and light had begun to fold in on themselves. Then he noticed the door at the end of the hall. Apartment 203. No one had lived there for months, but now it was open. A sliver of darkness yawned beyond the threshold, impossibly black, deeper than shadow. Something was inside, watching, waiting. Fingers slowly emerged from the darkness, wrapping around the edge of the door. Not quite human. Too long, too thin, curling around the edge of the door. The skin wasn't just gray. It was wrong, shifting like static, like it wasn't fully real. The fingers twitched. Escher bolted. He didn't stop until he was outside, breath steaming in the cold air. The city was dead silent, buildings looming in their gray-scale monotony. But something had changed. The streetlights flickered, and for the first time since the color vanished, Escher saw something new. In the distance, above the rooftops, high in the night sky, a single, pulsing red light, the first color he had seen in weeks. And deep in his gut, Escher knew it was calling to him. He had two choices: run the other way and pretend he never saw the red light, or go to it. Every survival instinct screamed for the first option, but something deep inside, something primal, pulled him toward the second. It was the first color in a world that had been stripped bare. It was wrong, unnatural, but it was something. His feet were already moving. The city was eerily empty. Cars abandoned at intersections, their windshields coated in dust. Storefronts remained open, shelves half-stocked, as if people had simply walked away from their lives. The red light pulsed, steady and slow, coming from the tallest building in the city, the old communications tower. As Escher approached, he felt it before he heard it. A deep, low hum, subsonic, just beneath the range of hearing, but strong enough to feel in his bones. The street lights flickered in time with it. A shadow moved up ahead. Escher froze. A figure stood in the middle of the street, facing away. Motionless, the man, or what had been a man, wore a tattered suit, its fabric faded to gray like everything else. Something was wrong with him. His arms hung too long at his sides, limp and lifeless. His head titled slightly, as if listening to something Escher couldn't hear. And then, slowly, the man's neck snapped back, bending at an impossible angle. His face. Escher sucked in a deep breath. The man's eyes were gone. Just smooth, gray skin where they should have been. His mouth hung open in a silent, gaping O, like something had hollowed him out from the inside. And then, without moving his lips, a whisper slid from his throat. "You shouldn't see the color." Escher ran. His breath came in short, sharp gasps, feet pounding the pavement. The communications tower loomed ahead. The hum grew louder. The street lights died. Darkness swallowed everything except for the red glow above, pulsing faster now, more urgent. Something was chasing him. He could hear it, a skittering, impossibly fast, limbs scraping against the pavement. The tower doors were open. Escher threw himself inside and slammed them shut. Silence. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He took a shaky breath, turning to face the interior. The building was empty. An old stairwell wound up in the dark, leading to the roof. The red glow pulsed from above. There was a voice. Not from behind the door, not the stairwell, but from inside the room. A whisper, slithering through the air like a breath against his ear. You were not supposed to remember, Escher finally realized. The red light hadn't been calling him. It had been warning him. He turned slowly, his breath shallow. The room was empty, but the whisper had been right next to him. The red light pulsed above, faster now. Urgent. He forced himself forward, gripping the stairwell railing. He had to reach the top. He had to see whatever was waiting for him. The climb was endless. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls. His vision swam, his skin prickling, like something unseen was brushing against him. The climb ended at a door, rusty, slightly ajar. Beyond it, the red glow bled into the darkness. Escher pushed it open. He walked out onto the roof. The city stretched out below, dad and colorless. At the center of it all, perched on the tower's antenna, like a grotesque, broken thing, whatever it was not a machine. It was alive, a shifting, writhing mass, its surface pulsing with sickly veins of red light. It had no defined shape, no eyes or mouth, just an undulating, wet mass of twisting tendrils, each one ending in something horrifying. Faces, not full heads, just faces, half-formed, stretched, and distorting, mouths open in silent screams. They flickered in and out of existence, as if trapped. Escher knew, deep in his bones, these were the ones who had vanished. Not erased, not destroyed, absorbed. His stomach twisted, and his knees nearly gave out. The red light flared, and suddenly he remembered. The color hadn't been taken. It had been consumed, and the thing was still hungry. A shadow loomed from behind him. Escher turned just in time to see the eyeless man from the street standing in the doorway. But he was different now. His face was melting, the edges smearing like wet charcoal, his features slipping away. The man took a step forward, then another, and with each step, his body blurred, losing detail, like he was being erased in real time. "Join us," the voices whispered. Escher staggered back. The fleshy mass of faces quivered, responding to the movement, its tendrils stretching toward him. The eyeless man, if he even was a man anymore, took another step forward. His form blurred, warping like wet ink, his face melting away completely. Escher tried to run, but something grabbed his ankle. Ice shot up his leg as a tendril snaked up his calf. It wasn't solid, not exactly. It was like touching static, buzzing, shifting, eating away at him the moment it made contact. A dark gray substance was oozing out of his skin like ink in water. He kicked, thrashed, clawed at the rooftop, but it was pulling him in. More tendrils lashed out, latching onto his arm, his torso, his face, cold, deep, endless. His vision swam. Shadows moved at the edges of his sight. His skin tingled as something deeper than pain rippled through him, like he was being unraveled. The voices rose in a distorted, guttural chorus. "Join us," Escher gasped. And for the briefest moment, he saw everything. Not just the city, not just the rooftop. Beyond, the world before color disappeared, and the thing that had come before that, something vast, endless, watching, waiting. That fleshy thing of faces wasn't the beginning. It was only a fragment of something much worse. The red light pulsed one final time. Then it went out. Silence. Darkness. A whisper rippling through the void. Now we are free. Strange paint. Deborah had always been a solitary artist, pouring her heart and soul into her work in a dimly lit studio that smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Her latest masterpiece was a vibrant canvas depicting a mystical forest, alive with creatures that seemed to shimmer and dance under the flickering light of a nearby candle. As she painted the final stroke, the colors swirled and shimmered, as if the very essence of life had been captured within the frame. Unbeknownst to her, the painting was not just a piece of art. It was a portal to another realm, one that thrummed with whispers and secrets waiting to be uncovered. One stormy night, a curious art collector named Harold stumbled upon Deborah's gallery. He was immediately drawn to her latest creation, the forest, alive with colors that seemed to pulse in the dim light. Despite the warnings of the gallery owner, who sensed an unsettling energy emanating from the painting, Harold insisted on purchasing it. He felt an inexplicable connection to the artwork, as if it called out to him, promising wonders beyond his imagination. That night, he hung the painting in his study, entranced by its beauty and unaware of the darkness lurking within. Harold could not look away from the painting as the clock struck midnight. The figures within it, elusive woodland creatures and ethereal beings, began to shift and move, their eyes glinting with mischief and allure. They beckoned him closer, their whispers growing louder, promising secrets of the universe and glimpses of forgotten dreams. Each night, Harold returned to the painting, his heart racing with excitement and fear as he felt himself slipping deeper into its enchanting world. Days turned into weeks, and Harold's life began to unravel. He neglected his work, and isolation became his companion. Friends and family expressed their concern, but he brushed them aside, captivated by the beauty and mystery of the painting. In the quiet hours of the night, he would sit before the canvas, losing track of time as the figures danced and twirled, drawing him into their virant realm where reality blurred into fantasy. The whispers became more urgent, more insistent, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. One fateful night, driven by an insatiable curiosity, Harold reached out to touch the canvas. The moment his fingers brushed against the surface, a surge of energy coursed through him, and he felt himself pulled into the painting. The colors enveloped him, swirling around him like a tempest, and in an instant, he was no longer in his study, but standing in the very heart of the enchanted forest. The creatures surrounded him, their laughter echoing like chimes in the wind, and he felt a sense of belonging that he had never known before. As days turned into nights in this new reality, Harold became a part of the painting, a mere shadow of his former self. He danced with the creatures, forgetting the life he had left behind, lost in a world where time held no meaning. Yet, deep within him, a flicker of awareness remained, a whisper of the life he had abandoned. The forest, once a place of wonder, transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, and the creatures he had once adored began to reveal their true nature, deceptive and sinister. In the end, Harold understood too late that the enchanting world of Deborah's painting was a trap, a seductive illusion that fed on his very essence. As he stood among the figures, now twisted and grotesque, he realized he had become one of them, a mere echo of a man who had once been alive. The painting hung in his study, a beautiful facade hiding the darkness within, whispering secrets to anyone who dared to gaze upon it, inviting them to join him in the eternal dance of despair. One rainy afternoon, a friend of Harold's, Claire, knocked on the door of his house. She had grown increasingly worried about him since he had purchased the painting. Harold hadn't returned her calls in weeks, and she felt an unsettling urgency to check on him in person. As she entered, the air felt thick, charged with an energy that sent a shiver down her spine. "Harold!" she called, her voice echoing through the dimly lit hallway. There was no response, only the sound of raindrops tapping against the window. Claire moved cautiously toward the study, her heart racing. The door creaked open, revealing the painting that had captivated Harold's very soul. She gasped as she stepped inside, the vibrant colors of the forest contrasting sharply with the shadows that loomed over the room. The painting seemed to pulse with life as Claire approached it, and she felt an inexplicable pull, as if the figures within were beckoning her to join them. But something was off. The forest looked darker than she remembered, and the laughter of the creatures now sounded like haunting whispers. "Harold!" she called again, her voice trembling. Suddenly, she noticed a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. It was Harold, standing eerily still before the painting, his gaze fixed on it as if he were entranced. She rushed to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Harold, are you okay? You've been gone for so long. I was worried sick." His head slowly turned to her, but his eyes were vacant, as if he were staring through her rather than at her. "Claire," he murmured, his voice distant. "You have to see. It's beautiful here. You can join me. We can be free." Fear gripped Claire as she looked back at the painting. where the creatures now gazed hungrily at her, their smiles widening. "Harold, this isn't right. You need to come back with me," she pleaded, shaking him gently, but he shook his head, a hint of desperation flickering in his eyes. "You don't understand. This is where I belong now. The forest. It holds everything I've ever wanted. You can't leave it. You have to stay." His voice grew softer, almost pleading. "You have to join us." Claire's heart raced as she realized the truth. The painting had ensnared Harold, twisting his mind and spirit. And now it was trying to lure her in as well. She took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to escape. "No, Harold! You have to fight it. This isn't you." At that moment, the creatures in the painting began to writhe and stretch, their forms becoming more grotesque, their laughter turning into a cacophony of chilling echoes. They reached out with elongated fingers, as if trying to break free from the confines of the canvas. The air grew heavy, thick, with a malevolent energy that made it difficult to breathe. "Join us, Claire," they chorused, their voices a twisted melody that tugged at her heart. "It's beautiful here. You'll never feel pain again." With a surge of resolve, Claire grabbed Harold's arm and pulled him away from the painting. "No, you're stronger than this. Remember who you are," she shouted, her voice breaking through the haze that enveloped him. For a brief moment, Harold blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Claire? What's happening?" "Just breathe," she urged, her grip tightening around his arm. "We have to get out of here." The creatures within the painting howled in fury, their vibrant colors darkening as they sensed their prey slipping away. The shadows in the room twisted and churned, threatening to swallow them whole. Claire pulled harder, dragging Harold away from the painting, and as they stumbled backward, the connection between him and the canvas began to fray. With one last desperate attempt, the creatures lunged forward, their claws reaching for Harold. But just as they were about to grasp him, Claire shouted, "No!" and yanked him out of the study, slamming the door shut behind them. They stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath, the oppressive weight of the painting's energy dissipating. Claire turned to Harold, who was finally coming back to himself, confusion and fear etched on his face. "What just happened?" he gasped, shaking as if waking from a nightmare. "You were lost in that painting," Claire said, her voice trembling. "It was trying to take you, to keep you forever. But we escaped. You're safe now." As relief washed over Harold, he looked back at the closed door of his study, where the painting hung silently, its colors muted in the absence of his gaze. "I didn't realize. I thought I was free, Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. You were caught in its spell, but you're stronger than it. We need to get rid of that painting before it claims anyone else. With newfound determination, they returned to the study, where the painting seemed to loom larger, its colors still swirling with a hypnotic allure. Together, they hatched a plan to destroy it, to sever the bond it had formed with Harold, and ensure that no one else would fall victim to its seductive trap. As they prepared to confront the darkness within the canvas, they knew that the battle was far from over. The forest might have tried to claim Harold, but together they would fight to reclaim his freedom and banish the malevolent forces that lurked behind the vibrant colors. The whispers from the painting grew louder, but this time they would not be silenced. Bloodlines. The first time I noticed something was off, I was 13. It was a school night, and I got out of bed late in the night to sneak a soda from the fridge. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the television in the living room. It was unusual for anyone to be up this late. My dad sat in his chair with the light off, watching the late news. The headline at the bottom read, "The Nightshade Killer Strikes Again. 15 victims confirmed." I watched silently for a moment while the reporter talked about a lack of clues and how the police seemed to be baffled. I remember the way my father's lip twitched as he sipped his whiskey, almost like a smirk. He noticed me standing in the doorway, and in a blink, his expression softened, becoming familiar and warm. "Hey, champ, can't sleep?" he asked as he muted the TV and rose from his seat. I told myself I had imagined the smirk. I must have. The encounter stirred memories of hearing my dad coming and going at late hours. How closed off he could be at times, and how he would sidestep Mom's questions of where he was going and who he was with when they fought behind closed doors, thinking I couldn't hear. He was hiding something. A few weeks later, they had a huge fight. Mom accused Dad of having an affair, which he denied. Mom and I ended up leaving for a few months that summer to stay with my grandparents. Dad eventually convinced Mom he was not having any affairs, that his problem was with gambling, and he was getting help. I'm not sure if Mom totally believed him, but we did move back home, and things did seem to get better. The late-night outings stopped, and the tension at home faded with time. Eventually, the memory faded too. The killings had stopped, and the Nightshade Killer became an urban legend, the subject of true crime, podcasts, and late-night horror stories kids told at sleepovers and on camping trips. The police moved the case onto the cold pile, and most thought he had died or been locked up for some other crime. Then, when I was in my late 20s, they found another body, the The same victim type, the same ritualistic markings, and the same precision. The Nightshade Killer was back. That night, I visited my dad for dinner. As soon as I stepped into the house, I noticed something was off. The house seemed cleaner than usual. I could smell bleach in the air, thick enough to sting my nose. My dad was his usual self, calm and collected, always in control. He explained the smell away as a laundry mishap. He was still not used to doing it after Mom passed last year. During dinner, we talked mostly about me. Dad wanted all the details of how my life was going, all that I was willing to provide anyway. He asked about my work, life in general, and if I was seeing anyone yet. That is when I saw it. A faint red stain on the cuff of his sleeve. I got a good look as he poured a glass of whiskey for himself. The sight stirred something in the back of my mind that kept me up that night. That stain wasn't wine. It wasn't ketchup. It was blood. I knew it was. I remember the smirk. I needed proof. Real proof. The next day, I used my spare key to let myself in while Dad was out. My hands shook and felt more nervous than I expected. Not at the prospect of getting caught, but of the possibility of what I might find. The smell of bleach wasn't as strong, but it was accompanied by something else now. Something almost metallic. I made my way through the house systematically until I got to the basement door. It was locked. I don't remember the basement ever being locked. Using a bobby pin and a skill I picked up as a rebellious teenager, I clumsily picked the lock. The metallic smell hit me as the door opened. My stomach twisted as I descended the stairs, and the fluorescent light flickered to life overhead. The air was damp and cool, and as I reached the bottom and turned the corner, I saw them. Trophies. Photographs of women with terrified looks on their faces, and a date written on each one, neatly arranged on a workbench. Next to them, a stack of old newspaper clippings dating back to the first Nightshade killings. In the far corner, a freezer with a padlock and a collection of knives laid out across the top, looking freshly cleaned. I didn't need to open the freezer. I already knew what I would find. A creak on the stairs made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have come down here, champ." I turned slowly as Dad came around the stairs. His hands in his pockets, he watched me for a moment. His face showed no sign of fear at being found out, or anger that I had intruded. It was something more like patience, like he had been waiting for this moment my whole life. "It was you the entire time." My voice barely worked. I wanted to run and to throw up, but I couldn't move from that spot. Some sick part of me, something twisted and wretched in my blood, had to hear the word. I needed to hear him say them. "You killed them all?" "Yes." No hesitation, no remorse, just calm and collected as always, and merely stating a fact. And now you have a choice to make. At that moment, I felt the weight of generations pressing down on me. My mouth went dry as I tried to swallow. I wasn't sure if I was afraid of him or of how much of him was in me. I felt my lip twitch almost involuntarily. Maybe I was afraid of the choice I already knew I would make. Jailbreak. The cold, sterile hallway just outside of my confinement center wall made it possible to hear every footstep, growing louder as they neared me, fading as the person receded into the distance, marching to whatever task they were assigned. It was impossible to know how long I'd been here. Minutes felt like days. Hours felt like months. All I knew was that it was time. What was that quote from the Shawshank Redemption? Get busy livin' or get busy dyin'. It was now or never. I'd spent the last several months learning the patterns and rhythms of this facility, and I'd discovered that it was possible to make an escape undetected. It was, however, highly improbable. The odds of being discovered were astronomically high, and the consequences ranged from merely being returned to captivity, or, well, one simply had to come to terms with the risk being worth the reward. My mind was made up. The door to my cell was never locked, interestingly enough. The reality was I could walk out at any time, but that didn't make me any less of a captive. They knew that I couldn't just leave, and that made them reckless with this one very simple security measure. There were others here, too, held in similar circumstances as myself. If my plan was to work, if I could make my way to freedom, there would be new protocols put in place. The others would feel those consequences. That thought had kept me from trying to escape before, that my freedom would lead to their pain. But as the days and months wore on, I'd shoved those thoughts aside. Surely they had tried and failed at exactly what I'm attempting now. Did they consider how their success would affect me? I strongly doubted it. It was every man for himself in here, despite the words I'd heard time and time again as the guards and wardens walked past my cage. Sunlight flooded through the one small window behind me. It seemed as though it had been weeks of gray skies. The warmth on my skin was all the encouragement that I needed. It was now or never. I listened for the sound of 2 sets of footsteps coming down the hallway. This pair always made their way along the corridor at the same time every day, always together. After them, there would be 2 more, but this time in singles, a few minutes apart. Then it would be time. They all needed to see me, to know I was still here. Their complacency must remain intact for my plan to succeed. The faint sound of 4 feet making their way towards me finally could be heard. The steps grew louder, keeping pace with the increasing pounding of my heart as I knew the time had come. Louder, louder. My pulse began to increase. I had to bring it down. This cannot be done if I can't control my nerves. I felt my hands begin to shake a little with the increased adrenaline. Sweat began to form ever so slightly beneath my arms. I had to get control. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then another. Then another. I cleared my mind of what was about to take place. I didn't need to go over the plan any further. I knew it well. I just needed to move with calm deliberation. Another deep breath. I felt my heart rate begin to slow. Another deep breath. My hands steadied. Then the plodding footsteps came to a stop just beyond my door. "Hello in there," came the much too delighted voice of the middling drone on patrol. He was happy to be here, happy to be in the slightest position of power over me. Had a few things gone differently, maybe it would be me out there and him in here. I like to think that I'm better than him, though. I'd help with someone's escape plan if I was alerted to it, not ratted out. Or, at the very least, I'd look the other way, but not him. No, he derives meaning from this tiny amount of authority. I won't give him the satisfaction of getting even a hint of what I'm about to do. "Hello, sir," I reply back, attempting to soften the terseness that I want to convey. The woman who patrols with him never acknowledges me. I can tell she believes he should be more dismissive of me, that he should use whatever mediocre power he has to diminish my existence even further. Nice to see the sun shining again, isn't it? It is. Hopefully, you'll get to enjoy it fully soon. I know I will. I continued to myself. Perhaps, but my shift does run pretty late into the day, so maybe another time. The woman sighed with impatience. Well, I should carry on. See you on the next pass. Yes, on the next pass. Good day, sir. Their footsteps fade into the cavernous recesses of the facility to my right as I await the next set of footsteps. The waiting seemed to be the worst part of my plan so far. It gave my heart too much time to become anxious, so I tried to occupy my mind with thoughts of how the woman would berate the man if my actions were ever discovered, particularly if it became known that mere minutes after they'd passed, I'd made my move. A smile drifted across my face at the thought of it. She clearly had some type of authority over him, but I knew for certain it wasn't in rank. Perhaps it was in that same way that many women had authority over many men throughout all of time. The issues that my leaving will cause him, the erosion of his pathetic authority, brought a great joy to me. that steeled my nerves for my next encounter. I heard the clicking of heels echoing in my ears, and I braced myself for another interrogation. This time, however, there was only a slight pause, and then hurried footsteps away down the hall. I heard a slight commotion and some raised voices, an uncommon occurrence that I hoped would resolve itself quickly. I strained to listen, to determine if this new development would derail my escape before it had even truly begun. It's not what you think. Please? I just needed... You needed what? It was the man who had just stopped and spoke to me. He must have backtracked and surprised the poor guy, who clearly had the same thoughts of freedom as me. Why did he choose to go now? The timing was way off for any chance of success. Pathetic fool. I cursed him under my breath, because now they'd be on high alert, if they weren't already. Back in your cell. You don't come out until we say you can come out. I thought that was clear, but please, tell me if I need to make it more so. Do you want me to do that? No, sir. That won't be necessary. I'll have to report this, you know? You brought this on yourself. Perhaps the officers will have mercy. But it's really out of my hands. The silence that followed must have been the poor soul's sad acceptance of his fate. Finally, I heard everyone continue on their way, and I listened for the steps that would signal the beginning of my mission. I said a quick prayer that my outcome would not be the same as the one I'd just witnessed while the third patrol made its way to me. "Hello in there," came the petite voice of a woman nearing 60 years old. If she was a day, she really couldn't prevent anyone from leaving on her own. But that was just as true of the others who passed by here. Their abilities relied completely on their willingness to report to those who could act. Dodging detection by these tattletales was the only path to a successful jailbreak. "Hello, ma'am," I replied back, hoping I concealed my utter disdain. Calling me ma'am is unnecessary, but even more, it is unwanted. You make me feel old. My apologies. Nice to see the sun out again, isn't it? She examined me as she asked the question. It was not small talk. She was searching me. Yes, it is. It's been a while. Hopefully, you'll get out to enjoy it. My heart rate began to rise slightly as I replied. Her eyes pierced into mine as I took slow, deliberate breaths to calm myself. I can't imagine I appeared nonchalant, but hopefully, at the very least, I wasn't giving away my intentions. "Well, I have a long day here, so it's hard to say," she said at last. My heart beat began to return to normal. "See you on the next pass." "Yes, on the next pass." "Good day, Ma." I caught myself before the word fully formed. "Good day, miss." She smiled at that, turned, and began to slowly walk toward my right, just as the others had. When I heard her steps turn the far corner and vanish, It was time for me to go. I stepped out slowly, looking both ways. The coast was clear, so I hurried to my left, careful not to break into a run, as the sound of my steps might give me away to someone I couldn't see. Around the corner to my right, there was a large desk and 2 chairs. I had discovered that this desk was only occupied 2 days a week. Today was not one of them, so I slipped behind it and waited. Now my heart was racing, but that was of no concern. If I was seen at this point, it was all over anyway. I only needed my nerves to stay intact enough to remember my plan. And if I'm being honest, the adrenaline would help my focus. This next part was crucial. I peeked under the desk and waited. Soon 8 sets of shoes appeared from the direction I needed to go. They would pass this desk and then break off in 2 separate directions, as they always did. I had never seen them, but I could hear them from my cell. If they saw me behind this desk, I was done for. It was the biggest risk to my plan that I was aware of. But they always seemed so engaged in chatting with each other that I felt like it was a risk worth taking. I tried making myself as small as I could and steadied my breathing. One glance in the wrong direction by any of these 8 sets of eyes could cost me everything. I closed my eyes and just listened. It sounded just like it always had. This group was all men. They were young and constantly spoke over each other, trying to one-up the last story, get a bigger laugh, be a bigger idiot. But their youth didn't make them any less dangerous. In fact, it was probably the opposite. They had more to gain by exposing someone like me trying to escape. Thankfully, they seemed to be their normal, obnoxious selves today. They loudly caravanned past me, but then they stopped abruptly. That wasn't normal. Did you hear that? One of them asked no one in particular. The group continued to jabber on. Wait. Shh, he said more forcefully. Panic began to form in my chest. I tried to make myself even smaller and more invisible underneath the desk as I held my breath, desperately trying not to make even a whisper. When the whole group was fully compliant in listening intently, the questioner let out the longest, loudest, most foul flatulence directly at my hiding place. He erupted in laughter as the rest of the group had mixed reactions of laughter or complete disgust, while I did my absolute best to not give myself away. A cough building in my chest as my eyes began to water. At last, the group moved on, splitting into 2 groups of morons, as was the usual course of action. When the sound of both had sufficiently faded, I collapsed onto the floor and allowed myself the smallest of coughs to clear my lungs before peeking out to be certain I was alone. The next doorway I needed was down the hall, where the dangerous imbeciles had come from. Once I went through those doors, I was in foreign territory. I had no idea what the comings and goings would be like, so I'd have to maintain strict diligence of focus. Certain that no one could see me, I crept from my safe zone and stayed low and against the wall, heading to the next door. I put my ear against it and listened. Silence. I cracked it open and slowly entered the next room. To my left was a bank of elevators. To my right, a restroom. But the hallway was empty. I stepped into the open and was deciding on whether an elevator or the stairwell was riskier when I heard voices approaching the door at the far end. Without a thought, I leapt to my right and into the restroom. I pushed a stall door open, closed it quickly behind me, turned the lock, and climbed onto the toilet, using my hands to balance against the walls of the stall, formulating a plan of what to do in the event that the group followed me into the restroom became unnecessary, as I heard them pause outside of the door and briefly chat before moving away. I wasn't sure where they had gone, or even if all of them had left, but I had to keep moving. I had no choice. I slipped out of the stall and poked my head out of the restroom. The hallway was once again empty. I decided to take the elevator down. There was an equal chance of an encounter with someone either way, but at least the elevator was faster. I needed luck for this to succeed, at this point anyway, so I pushed the button. The cables and gears of the elevator working sounded as though they were beckoning the whole building to take notice of the fugitive awaiting the doors to open. It felt like days passed, but finally the elevator arrived. I was prepared to flee to my restroom of refuge if someone was in the car, but fate shined on me and I stepped inside and pushed the fear of having nowhere to run deep inside as the doors closed in front of me. I had to get down 4 floors. If I could do that, I would be able to taste freedom. To this point, my vanishing act seemed to have gone unnoticed. I heard no alarms. No one seemed to be chasing me. The doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped tentatively out, checking both directions. The lobby that the lift exited to was empty, aside from a few chairs and one low table. There was one guard station I had to get past, and then I simply needed to keep moving, far away from this place. The guard's head was down, distracted by whatever was keeping him glued to his phone. He didn't know me. I could simply walk past him, but even that seemed like a risk. It was not the time to get sloppy. Hugging the wall, I walked closer to the officer until I felt I had no choice but to crouch down. I still needed to move quickly in case anyone from the 4th floor found their way down here, but I'd have to do it from the ground. I laid flat and began to army crawl along the edge of the guard station's massive marble desk. When I'd reached the other side, I edged close to the wall again and inched my way to a standing position and began to walk. "Sir! Hey! Mister! Hey!" Panic. The guard must have finished his TV show at the worst possible time. I glanced back to see him getting out of his seat and coming my way. "Sir, you have to come back. Sir, you can't leave." Bet. I erupted into a sprint down the long hallway with windows on both sides. If anyone from the 4th floor could see me, it was all over. You have to sign out. You can't just leave. Sign out? No way. The guard was gaining on me. He was fast, not like one of those lazy guards you'd see on TV who'd rather eat a donut than do a push-up. He was going to catch me before I could get off the grounds. It was over. I blasted through the door to the outside world and took the steps down 3 at a time. I heard the guard right behind me, closing in fast, just as a car pulled up and screeched to a stop. The door flung open. "Get in." I didn't stop to think. I jumped in and was closing the door as the car began to speed away. I glanced back to see the guard cursing and throwing his hands in the air before I turned to the driver. "Perfect timing," I grinned. "I wasn't sure if you could make it. You have your clubs? Matt's got 'em. He said he'd meet us there. So your boss let you go?" "Ha, no. But it's fine. No one knows I left. And by the time they find out, it won't raise any suspicions. No way I was missing the first round of spring. I knew it. I told them you'd make it. You just won me $20. Glad I could help you out. Buy me a beer at the turn. Now step on it. I want to putt a few before we have to tee off." The Enchanted Minds canvas. Ella carefully added the finishing touches to her painting, layering vibrant strokes of green amid the earthy browns and faded tans of fall. The scene was one she had sketched in the park days ago. A quiet landscape draped in the remnants of late autumn, the air crisp with the bite of encroaching winter. As her brush danced across the canvas, her mind drifted to the frozen pond she had sat across from, its surface resembling a sheet of shattered glass reflecting the pale autumn sky. Then something shifted. A sudden eerie chill prickled her skin, creeping over her arms despite the warmth of her studio. The faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled her nose, so vivid it nearly overwhelmed her senses. A sharp gust of wind brushed past her cheek, biting at the tip of her nose. She gasped. Her fingers trembled around the brush as the sensation deepened, no longer just a figment of her imagination. It felt real. The world around her wavered, its edges blurring as if reality itself had begun to ripple beneath her fingertips. Ella's heart raced. Her hand wasn't just gliding over the painting, it was sinking into it. Her studio began to shift, the walls dissolving into streaks of color. And then, in an instant, she was there. The park looked exactly as she had painted it. Frost-laced grass, undressed trees swaying, and a frozen pond glistening under the pale sunlight. The icy air sent a chill up her spine as the wind whispered through brittle branches. Her heart pounded. How am I here? Before she could take a step forward, the sensation snapped, sharp and sudden, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. The world around her rushed past in a dizzying blur, and in the blink of an eye, she was yanked back to her studio. Ella glanced around, her breath unsteady as she tried to ground herself. Her gaze settled back on her painting, looming more vibrant, more lifelike, almost as if it had absorbed some essence of reality itself. Her eyes then fell to the floor. Scattered across the hardwood were remnants of dead grass and brittle leaves, the very same ones that had lined the park's frozen ground. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then, like a whisper from the past, a memory surfaced. One she had long convinced herself was nothing more than a dream. This had happened before. A few months after waking from her coma, she had felt the same eerie pull, like an inexplicable shift between worlds. But she had dismissed it, blaming it on the lingering haze of recovery, a mere figment of her imagination. But it wasn't just her imagination, was it? She had seen it happen, and more. It started subtly. Cats stretching, birds ruffling their feathers, shifting within the canvas. With each incident, her paintings became eerily lifelike, earning her recognition and eventually her own gallery exhibition. But this was different. This time, she hadn't just brought something to life. She had been pulled into it. A shiver ran down her spine. The cold from that autumn landscape still clinging to her bones. She turned back to the painting, a strange weight settling in her chest. Whatever was happening to her, it wasn't just art anymore. It was something deeper, something more powerful, and she had no idea how to control it. 5 years ago. Anxious and impatient, Ella paced the hospital, her walker tracing an endless figure 8 of corridors. She wanted out. She was bored, exhausted, and angry, tired of the constant checkups, the intrusive monitoring, the way doctors spoke about her as if she weren't in the room. Most of all, she was tired of feeling like the world had moved on without her. Her classmates had graduated, their social media filled with college acceptance letters, beach trips, and late-night adventures. Meanwhile, she was stuck here, relearning how to walk, how to hold a fork without her hands trembling, how to exist in a life that had been paused for a little over 6 months. For half a year, Elizabeth Ella Larson had been lost in a silent void, trapped in a coma she had no memory of falling into. One moment, she was on the bus ride home from a school field trip, laughing with her friends. The next, darkness. Her class's bus narrowly avoided a catastrophic collision with a tractor trailer. The truck driver, having fallen asleep at the wheel, veered into the bus's lane, forcing the driver to make a desperate maneuver to prevent disaster. While most students escaped with minor injuries, the incident took a more serious toll on a few. Tragically, the bus driver suffered a heart attack at the scene, and 2 students sustained severe head injuries, slipping into comas, Ella being one of them. When Ella woke, the piercing brightness of hospital lights and the rhythmic beeping of monitors shattered the stillness, as if time had paused. But the world hadn't waited for her. Her face was already all over social media, her story shared and reshared by curious classmates. Though her parents and hospital staff tried to shield her from the media, it was inevitable. Visiting friends posted selfies and status updates, ensuring her return wasn't just her own. Initially, the attention was overwhelming. Luckily, to Ella's relief, the novelty eventually faded. Only a few persistent reporters and social media diehards still sought a glimpse of the girl who emerged from a coma. Meanwhile, life resumed for everyone else, leaving Ella to realize she hadn't just lost 6 months. She had lost so much more. Pep rallies, graduation, and spring break. Before the accident, Ella had been an exceptional artist for her age. She had spent years perfecting her craft, creating paintings so lifelike they seemed to breathe on the canvas. Art was her passion, her escape, and hopefully her future. She had applied to countless schools, dreaming of the day she would walk through the doors of an art academy. But the more she recovered, the more she sensed that something had changed. A strange energy pulsed through her hands, as if the accident had left behind more than just scars. At first, she had brushed the feeling off as nothing more than a lingering effect of her recovery. However, when she finally picked up a pencil again, her art would begin to capture more than just reality. Hoping to lift her spirits, her parents brought her sketchbook. The physical therapist agreed and encouraged her to draw, believing it might restore her fine motor skills quickly. But the first time she tried sketching, her fingers, once so steady, betrayed her. The once effortless strokes turned to jagged, clumsy lines, chicken scratch from a toddler's hand. Frustrated and disheartened, she shoved the sketchbook aside and refused to touch it for days. Then, one afternoon, on impulse, she picked it up again. She began sketching the vase of flowers that sat on her hospital windowsill, a gift from her art teacher. The sunlight caught the delicate curve of a lily petal just right. making it the perfect subject to draw. As she sketched the details, a strange warmth spread through her fingertips. As Ella became completely immersed in her sketch, her mind wholly focused, the air around her began to shift. The scent of fresh lilies began to overwhelm her senses, far more intense than before. Startled, she looked up. Her breath caught. The real flowers had changed. The lilies that were half closed were now in full bloom, mirroring the one she had just finished drawing. Her sketchbook slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud on the hospital bed. Ella stared at her fingers, watching as dust particles swirled in the afternoon light. Except they weren't just dust. The air around her shimmered, an iridescent glow clinging to her skin. She blinked, her heart pounding. It had to be a hallucination, a trick of her recovering mind, just a dream, she told herself, while her eyes were still fixated on her hands. Yet deep down, she knew the truth. Something within her had been unlocked. Awakened by the sun's warmth, Ella sat up, squinting against the bright light streaming through her bedroom window. Despite the winter chill, the morning sun cast an ironic touch of warmth to the frigid 30-degree day. As she shook off the haze of sleep, the sharp beeping of her alarm clock jolted her fully awake, a nagging reminder of the day ahead. She was scheduled to inspect the gallery rooms in the newly opened art building downtown, ensuring her pieces were displayed exactly as she envisioned. Tomorrow marked her debut exhibition, the moment she had worked toward for years. Excitement and nerves twisted in her chest. It was finally here, and she wasn't about to leave anything to chance. Silencing the alarm, Ella swung her legs over the bed and took a steadying breath. She grabbed the outfit she had picked out the day before, sophisticated yet artistic, the perfect balance. Heading towards the bathroom, she caught a glimpse of her latest work, leaning against the wall, a hypnotic twilight scene of Pittsburgh's skyline reflected in the Monongahela River. The river seemed to shimmer, as if a ripple might break across the surface if she stared too long. Nope. Nope. Not today, she muttered, quickly looking away. No incident, especially not tomorrow. But what if it happened again? What if a painted river overflowed, flooding the gallery? Or a sudden gust of wind swept through, touching the viewers? And what if they realized what she could do? She pushed the thought aside, taking a deep breath as she splashed water on her face. She needed to focus on the gallery, on today. No distractions. She'd been careful all week. Still, the memory of being transported to the park unnerved her. Nothing that extreme had happened since, but the occasional ripple of water or a bird nearly lifting off the canvas was enough to make her uneasy. After getting dressed, she made a quick breakfast. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from her best friend, Rosalie. "Good luck, Ella, and relax. You've got this. See you tomorrow at the show." Ella smiled at the words, even though her stomach was in knots. She typed back, "Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow." Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. This time, the gallery curator. Just a reminder, the final walkthrough is scheduled for 11 a.m. Bring any additional pieces you'd like to include in the collection. The gallery is confident your work will be a hit. Ella inhaled and exhaled slowly. Everything would be fine. She grabbed the two paintings, the one of Pittsburgh reflected in the Monongahela, and another tucked behind it, along with her purse and keys. By the time she arrived at the gallery, her nerves had settled into quiet determination. The venue was stylish and contemporary, with high ceilings and whitewashed walls, perfect for showcasing her work. A gallery handler took the paintings she'd brought, placing them in their designated room, while a marketing assistant guided her through the maze of exhibits. Each piece displayed exactly as she had envisioned. She moved through the gallery, carefully inspecting each painting, occasionally adjusting placements to perfect the flow. Her twilight scene of Pittsburgh's skyline sat front and center, positioned so the lighting captured every reflective detail in the water. But as she stared at the shimmering river, a familiar pull stirred in her chest. No, not now. Not here. She forced herself to look away, focusing on the next piece. A series of landscapes inspired by the city's parks. Under the gallery lights, the colors felt more vibrant, almost alive, as if one could stride in. But as she neared a painting of a dense, forested path, the pull returned, subtle yet unsettling. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wall to steady herself. She couldn't risk it. Not here. Not today. Why was this starting again? Was it because she was tense and anxious, trying to suppress the sensation? She shifted her focus to the gallery curator and marketing assistant, who had been quietly observing her. Forcing a smile, she said, "Everything looks great. I think we're all set for tomorrow." "Fantastic. Everything will be perfect. We just need you to review the virtual gallery site and give your approval," the curator said cheerfully. Ella nodded, her thoughts swirling. Tomorrow would be okay. She just had to keep her focus. If she could get through today without any mishaps, then tomorrow, the grand opening, she would be able to maintain control. She just had to make sure nothing came to life from her paintings or whisked anyone away. The next day arrived in a flash. Her art exhibition was set to begin at 1 p.m., and she needed to be at the gallery by 11 a.m. to handle any last-minute details, do a final walkthrough, and prepare for the guests. Last night, after returning home to unwind, she had felt the urge to draw, but she forced herself not to. She needed to rest, to stay focused. She didn't want to tempt the growing power within her. By the time Ella stepped into the gallery, the air was rich with the scent of fresh flowers, the sweetness of wine, and the faint trace of new paint. The space had transformed overnight. Elegant spotlights bathed each painting in a soft glow, making the artwork seem even more alive. Small, stylish benches were arranged throughout the room, inviting visitors to linger. Soon, guests began to arrive, mingling with glasses of wine in hand, their murmurs forming a low hum of anticipation. Ella smoothed her dress, a beautiful wrap dress with bell sleeves, the fabric printed with an abstract design from one of her early paintings. Her friend Rosalie had helped bring it to life, sewing it into a wearable piece of art. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the room, watching how people responded to her work. Rosalie was the first to spot her, letting out an excited squeal as she rushed over. "You did it, Ella. Look at all these people. And your work. It's absolutely breathtaking under these lights. You've been busy over the years. Just look at all these paintings." She squeezed Ella's arms, beaming. "How are you feeling?" Ella forced a smile, letting out a nervous chuckle. "Excited, nervous, and definitely a little terrified." Rosalie laughed reassuringly. "Totally normal. Just breathe, okay? This is the moment you've been waiting for. And it's happening." Before Ella could respond, a voice cut through their conversation. Ella Larson. She turned to see a distinguished older man with long salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses. He extended a hand. "Hello, I'm George Morgan, art critic for the Tribune. I must say, your work is astonishing. There's a vibrancy and realism here that I rarely see in paintings these days." Ella's heart pounded against her ribs. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. That means a lot." She smiled, trying to keep her nerves in check. His gaze lingered on the twilight of Pittsburgh painting. This one in particular. It's mesmerizing. It almost feels as though the water is truly moving. How did you achieve such a remarkable effect? Ella swallowed hard. "Oh, I tend to get in a zone," she said with a small, nervous smile. "A lot of detail, layering, and finding the right mix of paint." Morgan nodded approvingly. "Enchanting, almost lifelike." As the critic moved on, Rosalie elbowed Ella subtly. "See? You're already impressing the media." Ella barely had time to absorb the moment before Dina, the gallery owner, approached with an eager expression. "Ella, would you mind coming with me? The guests would love to hear a few words from you. Some are already interested in purchasing your work. Just a short welcome and a bit about your inspiration, okay?" Ella's stomach clenched, but she nodded. This was part of the dream, right? Taking a deep breath, she followed Dina to a small platform at the center of the room. As the soft clinking of glasses faded and guests turned to face her, Dina introduced her. Ella steadied herself and took a deep breath. Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Larson, but most people call me Ella. First, I want to thank Dina, the gallery owner, and Jessie, the curator, for giving my art the honor of being the first exhibit in this beautiful new space. And of course, thank you all for being here tonight. She continued her speech, her voice growing steadier with each word. When she finished, a soft round of applause filled the room. Ella exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. But just as she stepped down, a ripple of movement caught her eye. The twilight river, the light against the canvas shimmered. The water within the painting trembled, as if stirred by a real breeze. Ella's breath hitched. No, not now. Please, not now. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to focus, willing the movement to stop. Every ounce of concentration was poured into holding it still. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, grounding herself. Slowly, the movement faded. The river stilled. She exhaled, relief washing over her as she forced a smile, just as a guest approached with a compliment. Hold it together. Just a few more hours. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her abilities weren't just growing stronger. They were tied to her emotions. And she was losing control. Across the room, a guest murmured in disbelief. I could have sworn the cat's tail just wagged. Another gasp followed. Did that bird just fly to the other side of the canvas? Ella's stomach twisted. She needed to master her abilities fast. The painted door, for what feels like an eternity. I stare at the bloodied body without being able to move. It's sprawled at my feet, limbs flung wide open, limp, each arm and leg pointing in a different direction on the filthy cobblestone ground of the tiny, walled, dark, and abandoned courtyard. Above us, the moonlight and the sparks of stars flicker behind white clouds that slice through a deep blue sky, like ghost ships crossing distant, uncharted seas. The layers of mythical creatures and fearsome leviathans. With my free hand, I grope blindly at my own stomach, applying pressure to the wounds, the deep cuts that tore through flesh and muscles during the fight. Warm, dark blood gushes between my fingers, trickling down my arm, soaking the inner sleeve of my shirt and jacket. A lantern shines through the fogged glass of a third-floor window in the adjacent building. I run and hide, crouching behind a bush. Clenching my teeth, I stifle a groan. "Who's there?" demands the gruff, weathered voice of an old man. Through the tangle of leaves, cloaked in shadows, I watch him. He wears a long, white cotton nightgown and a matching cap. One hand holds the open window, while the other grips the lit lantern. He squints and scans the courtyard, fixing his gaze on the body. Hey, you degenerate drunkard. Go die somewhere else, Satan. Shoo, shoo. He yells like this for a minute or two, then grunts, mutters a curse, shuts the window, and disappears along with the light inside the room. I lift my head and look around, peering through one of the gaps in the ancient stone wall into the street. Seeing no one, I seize the opportunity to leave the scene. I rise, pull myself over the wall, and slip into the narrow, winding cobblestone streets. I try to move quickly, but quietly. I fail at both. The wound slows me down, saps my strength, the precision of my movements, and wherever I pass, I catch the attention of horses tied to posts or hitched to carriages, and dogs guarding gardens and courtyards. The former neigh and snort, the latter bark, bare their teeth, and growl behind fences, stone walls, or the iron bars of gates. The streets are deserted, except for the animals, silent save for their sounds, the gusts of wind, the rustling of leaves, the creak of hinges on lonely shop, and tavern signs swaying in the dim light. Of the lanterns hanging from sparsely spaced posts along the paths, only a few remain lit. I regret coming on foot, but at the same time, I know I had no choice. I couldn't risk having the coachman as a witness, and driving my own carriage alone would have raised too many suspicions. A rider draws far more attention than a man on foot. A man can move unnoticed, can hide at the first sign of danger, can leap over walls and slip through courtyards unseen, can climb walls and travel across rooftops. After a while, I stop feeling my legs, stop perceiving their movement. Despite my thick, fine clothes, I feel a terrible cold creeping up my spine, stabbing beneath my ribs, filling my chest and guts with dread. I collapse on my knees beside a wall and sit with my back against it in a dark alley, sheltered by shadows, trash, and foul smells. Just a minute, I think. I only need a minute if I allow myself 1 or 100. I can't say. But I wake startled when the clamor of sirens and bells reaches my ears. I've been discovered. They're after me. I bury the fingers of my free hand in the crevices of the wall, between the stones, and pull myself back onto my feet. I resume dragging myself forward, attempting to run. I stagger in zigzags, stumble and nearly fall, collide with posts, carriages, empty stakes, and walls, yet press on, one street at a time and one turn at a time, choosing the most crooked and darkest paths, cutting through back alleys, narrow lanes, and forgotten open courtyards. The dreadful symphony of the pursuit never seems far, but also doesn't gain on me as much as I fear. It follows me closely, always keeping the same distance, as if it were holding back for now. It is a macabre, inhuman sound, seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. I am about to turn a corner when I see the light, unlike any other I have ever encountered. It is not yellow or orange like the light of fire or lanterns. It is white, pulsating, alive, like sunlight itself. I stop, leaning against the wall of a building, mesmerized. The light crawls over the cobblestones like a living thing, formless and boundless. As it approaches, the colors of the lanterns, the animals, the stones, the ground, the walls, everything it is about to touch, fade away. It is as if the light is absorbing these colors, transforming objects into pencil sketches on white paper, like the ones I make before transferring my drawings in color to the canvases that I exchange for prestige, privilege, and fortune. Then the light swallows them, sucks up the colorless drafts as well, consumes them as if it were an immense, infinite mouth. The mouth of God, reclaiming into cosmic oblivion the living and the dead of this world. Behind the blinding curtain, the world disappears, ceasing to exist in a way that defies both physics and human intellect. Slowly, the light moves forward, a white void, smooth and shapeless, transforming what once was into nothingness. It is at that moment that the bells and sirens grow louder and closer, unbearably near. I look around and then start running again. I cross the intersection, with the light devouring the finite world to my right, and follow the street perpendicular to its advance. In a desperate attempt to lose my pursuers, I turn corners at random, sometimes left, sometimes right, zigzagging northward. My twists and turns are not always aimless. At times, I am forced to turn here and there, or backtrack when the wall of light appears just a few steps ahead of me, burning my eyes and rushing to envelop me. I shield my face behind my free hand and dive into the first available path to the right or left, or pivot on my heels and retrace my steps to the previous crossroads. Thus, I conquer the paved streets and the dirt roads, crossing the mile-long stretch that separates the town from my private hill and the mansion crowning it. I pass through the garden gates and rush to the front door. The guards and other staff still awake at this hour are startled, surrounding me, offering to help me walk, to carry me to a bed, a chair. They inquire about my injury, whether they should send a rider to fetch the physician from the village. I command them all to step back, to leave me alone. ordering that every door and window be sealed. For a brief moment, I work alongside them in this endeavor. But then I turn and make my way down the corridors to the bedroom. I kneel by the side of the massive canopy bed and touch Maria's warm face as she sleeps in peace and oblivion, undisturbed by the banging of doors, the shouted exchange of orders, or the music threatening to unravel my perfect world. The clamor of that million-strong chorus of sirens and bells. Gently, I wake her and help her to her feet. Quickly, my love, come with me. You must come with me, I whisper urgently, pulling her by the hand. She follows, trembling, crying, asking about all that blood, about the injuries, and the blood, the blood, the blood. So it was all over, then. Had I won? Were we finally free to live our love, no longer bound by escapes, lies, persecutions, or consequences? I pull her by the hand through the corridors to my studio. Along the way, I grab one of the lanterns hanging from rings fixed to the stone walls. I enter, pull her inside, and lock the door behind us. Frantically, I fly from one side of the room to the other, ensuring all other entrances and windows are shut as well. I move unsteadily, stumbling, pushing aside finished paintings, knocking over empty easels, unfinished canvases, and tables cluttered with papers, palettes, jars of paint, and brushes. Once convinced that every possible entry is sealed, I return to Maria, grasping her hand again, and lead her toward one of the walls. I scour the floor for a brush and a jar of paint. When I open the first jar, I find inside a solid, useless, gray lump. I hurry around the room, gathering more jars, only to find them equally futile. I try using the paint from the palettes, attempting to make it at least pliable with saliva. But to no avail. I find myself clutching a dry, useless brush, turning helplessly in place, sobbing, groaning in pain. Then I remember the wound, the blood. I return to the wall, grip trembling, inconsolable and bewildered Maria's hand. Dip the brush into my own wound, pulling it out with bristles drenched in blood, dripping red. Together, we approach the wall, and I begin to work. The bells and sirens grow ever closer, unbearably close, now just outside the corridor, sounding in neighboring rooms. With desperate and vigorous strokes, I paint a door, a doorknob, our only escape route. In my mind, I paint on the other side the perfect world, the perfect life, the happy ending we deserve. I squeeze Maria's hand a little tighter. I let the brush slip from my sticky, blood-soaked fingers, falling with a muffled thud beneath the cacophony of sirens and bells. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. With my free hand, I reach toward the doorknob and grasp nothing. No, this can't be. I open my eyes and try again. This time, keeping them wide open. Around us, the bells and sirens engulf the world, drowning out every other sound and voice. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. I look around, over my shoulder. From every corner of the studio, through the cracks in the windows and doors, the white, deadly light, that devouring force, seeps into the room. It stretches through gaps between boards and under the passages, swallowing colors, easels, brushes, canvases, and loose sheets of paper. I turn to Maria for one last embrace, but there is no time to know if the movement is completed or if the light is faster, extinguishing us before our farewell can come to fruition. I wake up with my head pounding, the bells and sirens exploding within my temples, and then the music begins to make sense. It sounds familiar, and I realize it is not composed of actual bells or sirens. Blindly, I stretch my arm to the side, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand, and turn off the alarm. I squint at the blinding white light of the sun streaming through the window of my small room, at the foot of my bed. Instinctively, still shrouded in the fog of dreams, I touch my stomach, searching for wounds, only to find it unscathed. Afterward, I get up, wait for the occupant of room 23 to finish their shower, take mine, get dressed, fill my travel mug with coffee in the kitchen on the ground floor of the pension, and rush to the bus stop a block away. Exactly at 7:45 a.m., I knock on the side door of the cafe where I work, located in the food court on the second floor of the Central Mall. William, the grumpy and bald manager, lets me in with a scowl and a grunt. I promptly put on my apron over my uniform, wear my cap, and take up my position. By 8:00 a.m., we are open and running full steam. At 8:17 a.m., Maria arrives. My sweet, small, slender, blonde, and gentle Maria with blue eyes. It's Thursday, and as usual, she is accompanied by her husband. He looks different in 21st century clothes, free of blood, with both eyes intact and without fatal gashes across his neck. They hold hands as they stand in line. At 8:22 a.m., they are in front of me, smiling and politely placing their order while they speak and smile, and I absent-mindedly jot down their requests. I see through the space between their bodies and heads, across the food court, into the art studio on the other side. At once, even from that distance, my eyes find the painting that captivated me 3 days ago. Among the dozens of canvases and easels displayed in the windows, a couple holding hands before a door painted on a wall. The man, clearly a celebrated artist from the 18th or 19th century, still clutching a brush wet with paint. And the door. That door. That door. And that freedom. And that door. And suddenly, they could go anywhere they wanted to, could love each other and be happy wherever they pleased, as much as their hearts desired, in any place they chose, and nothing else could follow them. Not through that door. Nothing beyond them would be able to cross it. Certainly, nothing bad or evil. I finish jotting down their order. We exchange pleasantries, and the couple turns their back on me. Maria turns her back on me, taking a seat at one of the tables with her husband. The two share a brief kiss, a tender smile. Clearing my throat, I call out in a loud and steady voice, "Next!" And the line moves, and life goes on around here. Killer date. No one suspects a good-looking man. He's too handsome to be a killer. And that's exactly what Michael Holloway used to his advantage. He spent hours at the gym, shaping his already good genes into a chiseled mask. It also helped that he was charismatic, with a smile that made most women double take. He had brilliant green eyes from his mother, paired with light brown hair from his father. At 6 feet in height, he was just a six-pack short of a photoshopped model. Michael knew he was different from a young age. He was 7 years old and on a family trip to Vermont to visit his grandparents. He was an only child of 2 loving only children, and that meant he naturally got a lot of attention. One night, as the adults were out back drinking and talking next to the fire pit, Michael was following his grandparents' old dog around the house. A chirp from the wall clock signaled 8 o'clock, food time. Right on cue, the dog's medicated kibble dropped into its bowl in the laundry room. He watched as the dog slowly scarfed up the food. Towards the bottom of the bowl, there was a clump of kibble that had not broken into smaller pieces. The old dog ate it up without noticing. It gave an abrupt, hiccup-like sound, and then started wheezing. Michael jumped back at first, but watched intently as the dog struggled to breathe. The hard clump of kibble blocked its windpipe. He did nothing as the dog walked around, not knowing what to do and unable to get air. It moved toward the doorway, but Michael stood up and closed the door. The dog looked up at him, its foggy eyes not comprehending what was going on. Michael waited until the dog collapsed. He brushed its soft fur gently until its pulse was gone. That was the first death Michael had witnessed, and so began his secret obsession with the morbid. He knew it was wrong, yet it got him excited like nothing else. Not alcohol, not drugs, not sex. Now he was in his 20s, a year out of college, living on his own in the big city. After years of reading and fantasizing about it, he was finally going to make his move. There was an old diner near his apartment where he often went for late-night meals on his cheat days. Eventually, the staff had gotten used to him and his usual order: a lettuce-wrapped burger with a side of saltless fries. One of the servers, a pudgy man with an acne-scarred face, told him on a particularly slow night that the diner was going broke. "We don't even have real cameras," he said with a laugh. When he noticed Michael look up at the camera on the ceiling, he added, "Those are empty. Pretty much a toy, just to scare people from getting any funny ideas." Michael laughed, flashing his pearly white teeth. The server laughed too, unaware of the mistake he had just made. It was a Friday, like any other for Michael. He got done with work early and went to the gym for 2 hours. To Michael, the only thing that got close to the feeling of a kill was a good pump. He loved feeling the tension of each muscle swell with each rep, almost as if he could feel them growing. Back at his apartment, he took a long shower before getting ready for the night ahead. The first order of plan was to masturbate. He had a big night ahead, and he was not going to let testicular impulses ruin it. Whatever Michael had done to fulfill his darker fantasies in the past, he did cautiously. There was no room for error, especially now. If he were to get caught, he'd rather die than go to rot in a prison cell for the rest of his life. He had gone over the plan over and over in his head, working out any kinks in the logic until he was confident in a plan he could execute. He wanted a pretty woman, someone easy on the eyes, who had moved to the big city on a whim. She had to also be living alone, with no one to check up on her. That is, of course, if he even met a girl that night. He didn't want to rush things. The last thing he wanted was to get overzealous and overlook something stupid. Most importantly, he couldn't get attached. He repeated those words like a mantra as he waited for his food. The bell on the door dinged him out of his head. That's when he saw her. Susan Bennett wanted an uneventful night. It had been a long week, and she wasn't looking for any action. But she knew Michael was the one as soon as she saw him across the diner. Her mind began to race, and she did her best to quiet it down. Keeping her eyes low, she followed the server to the booth right in front of the brown-haired model. If she had a type, Michael was it. She asked for water with no ice to buy her some time and pretended to read the menu. In reality, her eyes kept darting toward him. Her left hand crept into her handbag to check if she had what she needed should the night get frisky, and breathed out a sigh of relief. She also felt around for the pepper spray to use in case of emergencies. Her gaze swept over the menu as she tried to figure out how to approach him. With a head of shiny blonde hair and a curvy body, she wasn't usually the one to make the first move. She didn't have to. "Is this seat taken?" said a smooth voice. Susan looked up to find Michael standing in front of her. His smile distracted her, but she recovered fast. "No," she said, flashing a smile of her own. "It is not." Michael slid into the seat across from her, and she caught the scent of dirty vanilla. She liked it. "Hi," Michael said with an outstretched hand. "My name's Michael." "Susan," she said. His hand was cool to the touch. Susan was wearing a low-cut tank top, not for grabbing attention, but because she thought she looked good in it. But she didn't mind, as Michael's eyes quickly glanced down during their handshake. They exchanged some pleasantries and got to know each other. Susan found out that Michael works as a fitness coach, and Michael was amused when he found out that Susan was a freelance designer. "I didn't need to be in the city," she admitted to him. "But things at home were rough, and I kind of just needed an excuse to get out of there. You know, I get it," he said. "Parents can be a lot to deal with." "Yeah." Her voice was low. "I just feel guilty about ignoring them sometimes. I mean, they raised me, put a roof over my head, and fed me. It feels the least I can do is call them once in a while, just to let them know I'm okay." Michael sat back and studied her face. It was beautiful, with the sharp features of her nose and jaw accenting the curves of her cheeks and lips. "When I was in college, I took a philosophy class with a pretty eccentric professor. One of the exercises he loved to do was hand out cards with random topics on them and encourage you to debate from that point of view. One day, I got a card that said, 'Parents don't deserve anything from their children.' Now, I don't think anything is quite that cut and dry, but for the sake of the exercise, I went with it." Susan sipped at her water as Michael went on. "The point starts with a sort of analogy. Take your phone, for example. The person, or more likely, people, who made that phone will never use it. In fact, they make it knowing that it's not for them. There was a demand, and they were meeting it. It is a societal role that they choose. My argument was that it was the same for a human. There is a demand, an ecological need to reproduce, to keep the species alive. A person who chooses to have a baby is, in effect, meeting the market demand. To expect something back, monetarily or otherwise, once your job of raising that child is done, is not part of the contract." Michael sat back with a deep breath. "Of course, there are holes in that argument, as my classmates pointed out, but you get the gist." Susan watched Michael as he got a sip of his own drink, an iced tea lemonade. "Switched tables, I see," said the server, sliding a lettuce-wrapped burger in front of him. "Here's your order, Michael." "Thanks, Brittany," Michael said. He looked back at Susan to find her smiling at him. He shrugged. "I come here often." Susan's server came back to take her order. "A buffalo chicken wrap, please," she said. He scribbled it down and left to place the order. The conversation continued. nearly uninterrupted for an hour. By then, Susan had already made up her mind on what she wanted to do. And so had Michael. Michael paid for the meal, refusing Susan's attempts to pay him back. "You saved me from a lonely dinner. This is the least I can do." The city air was cool, and it gave them an excuse to move closer to each other as they walked. Michael said, with calculated hesitation. "I apologize if it's too soon, but my apartment is a block away. I was thinking maybe we could go up for a couple of drinks. Hang out?" Susan felt like it was her lucky day. "That sounds nice," she answered. "If we cut across this alley, we'll be there in 5 minutes." He paused and then added, "If you're okay with that." She said she didn't mind, and they turned into the alley that led to the back of Michael's apartment building. It was quiet inside the halls, and they shook the chill out of their bones. "I live on the 6th floor. We can go wait for the elevator, or we can just take the stairs here." "I can't disappoint Mr. Health Coach now, can I?" "Stairs it is," Michael said, holding the door open for her. Things were going better than he could have hoped, and he did his best not to let his anticipation show. However, as they walked up the stairs, one thing began to bug him. A nagging voice in the back of his head that asked one simple question. "Do you love her?" He told himself to not get attached and pulled out the door to the 6th floor. "It's the second door on the right, 607. The hallway was empty, and there were no cameras in the stairwell. No one knew that she was there. Michael opened the door to his apartment and let her step inside first. He had lit a candle while he got ready, and though it had been nearly 2 hours since it was out, the fragrance still hung in the air. "This is a nice place," Susan said. The studio apartment was sparsely furnished, but everything felt purposeful. A rustic red couch paired with an oak coffee table. A matching oak dining table sat in the corner of the kitchen area. Numerous paintings hung on the beige walls, and a few plants bordered the sliding door to the balcony. "Thank you," he said, taking her coat from her and hanging it in the front closet. He brushed his hair out of his way and smiled to himself. She was here. Everything he wanted. He took a second to admire her a distance as she looked at his record collection. "So, what would you like to drink?" he asked. She said. "Anything strong? Like a whiskey?" Michael knelt down and picked up a bottle of aged Kentucky bourbon. "Will this do?" "Works for me." Michael took out 2 glasses and dropped in 2 thick blocks of ice. "This a sweet collection you got here," Susan said. "Do you mind if I play one?" "Go right ahead." The records were alphabetically ordered, and Susan slid her finger along the slide until she made it to Kind of Blue. She slipped it out of its cover and put on the record player. Michael froze when he heard the first few notes of his favorite record, and then shook his head. "Great choice," he said. He took up the glasses and walked over to her. They sat down together on the sofa, sipping at their drinks and taking in the music. Susan closed her eyes and laid her head back. The sight was so dizzying that Michael placed the cool glass against his temple. "I'll be right back," he said. He placed his glass on an old jazz-themed coaster and walked into the bedroom. He got what he needed, a candle and lighter, but stood in the dimly lit room a while longer. He pictured his hands around Susan's throat, and his heart rate picked up. He held his breath for a few seconds, and then slowly let it put. Then, once more. His fingertips began to get tingly, and he knew he was ready. When he went back into the living room, Susan was staring out the sliding door. She jumped when he flicked the lighter. "Do you like vanilla?" he asked. Susan nodded, and then returned her attention to the city outside. Michael grabbed his drink and downed the rest of it. "Did something catch your eye?" "No," Susan answered. "It's just this city, always so alive, so big. It just reminds you how small you really are." Michael adjusted his posture and approached her from the back. "Not to me," he whispered. "Not in here." Susan turned around to face him. "You think so? From where I'm standing. You're all I see." He leaned forward slowly and waited, eyes locked, for her to move in. She hesitated for a second and then closed the distance. The kiss was explosive. Once their lips met, they did not separate. Michael closed the blinds with one hand, while the other caressed Susan's face. His thumb gently brushed her smooth cheeks. Michael's hands snaked down, and without missing a beat, he picked her up. His firm hands supported her thighs as he walked toward the sofa. It wasn't until he laid her down on the sofa that their lips parted. Susan glanced at the one empty glass on the table and grabbed her own to finish, as Michael made a show of unbuttoning his shirt. His pecs were dusted with curly brown hair, and Susan ran her fingers across his chest. Michael bent back down to kiss her once more. His hands ran along her body, his mind resisting the urge to carry out the plan he had set out on. Every time he worked up the courage to move his hands to her neck, his heart pushed them down. Susan moaned lightly under him, and he thought of his own pleasure. His heart rate picked up once more, and the tingling sensation returned to his fingers. As they kissed, he put his left hand around her throat and began to give it some pressure. Susan didn't react, either unaware of the sensation or unbothered by it. After a few moments, he tightened his grip. Susan pulled away from him, but still didn't fight him. She simply stared up at him, her breath caught in her throat. Doing his best to keep his heart rate under control, Michael closed his hand around her throat even further. Worry flickered in her eyes, but panic didn't set in until Michael put his right hand around her throat too. His hands wrapped all the way around her delicate throat, and she began to flail as she realized what he was doing. Her hands slapped at his biceps and then reached hopelessly for his face. She tried to croak something out, but he tightened his grip further still. For a moment, he thought he saw her laugh to herself, but it was soon replaced by a deadpan expression as her brain lost oxygen. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and he kept squeezing with both hands, watching her intently as the life left her body. Her body stopped moving, but he didn't relent until he was sure of what he had done. There was no going back. As he pulled his hands off of her, her body gave one final shudder. Michael's breathing was heavy, and a thick layer of sweat coated his head. He stared at his hands. If not for the fact that he could see them attached to his body, he felt as if they were not his own. He started to stand up, to move to his room, to grab his camera, when he stumbled to the ground. Disoriented, he sat up on the ground. His foot had knocked over Susan's purse, and a small white bottle rolled out. His vision grew blurry as he reached for the bottle. Inside were the remnants of a fine, white crystalline powder. Michael rolled the bottle over until he saw the writing on the side in cute little letters. Aconite. He dropped the bottle and tried to stand, but his muscles refused to hold him up. He collapsed on the ground. Michael's heart began to skip beats, and all he could do was lie on the carpeted floor and stare up at Susan's outstretched hand, lifeless. The last thing Michael saw was the tattoo of a dog on Susan's wrist, its black eyes staring down at him. The chromatic drought. Detective Marcus Sign squinted at the fading landscape through his office window. Another day, another shade of gray, lost to whatever this phenomenon was. The sky no longer held its azure expanse, just a flat, pale ceiling hanging lifelessly above a world growing increasingly two-dimensional. 3 more reports of rivers running dry in the Eastern District, Officer Palmer said, dropping a thin file onto Sane's desk. And the hospitals reporting 17 new cases of what they're calling chromatic dehydration. Sign nodded grimly. The medical examiner had shown him the bodies last week. Skin paper-thin, organs collapsed inward, as if someone had extracted not just the water, but the very substance from them. Their eyes, once spherical, had flattened to perfect circles, staring out from faces that resembled pencil sketches more than human remains. Any pattern to where it's spreading? Sign asked, though he already knew the answer. None that makes sense, Palmer replied. It's jumping between neighborhoods, between people who've never met. The only consistent thing is that once it starts in an area, everything there loses dimension within 72 hours. Sign turned away from the window. His own hands seemed less substantial today, the knuckles less pronounced, the veins no longer raised beneath his skin. He'd taken to pressing his palms against solid objects throughout the day, reassuring himself that he could still feel texture, still interact with a three-dimensional world. "What about the library research?" he asked. Palmer's expression darkened. "Archives are becoming affected. Books are losing their ink, words disappearing from pages, even as people try to read them." This was worse than Sane had feared. Knowledge itself was being drained from the world. The river had been the first to go in Westbrook. Once a vibrant blue-green artery cutting through the heart of the city, it had faded to a pale, silvery streak before disappearing entirely, leaving only a shallow depression in the ground where water had flowed for centuries. Sine stood in the dry riverbed, feeling the cracked earth beneath his shoes. It didn't feel like drought. There was no sense of moisture having evaporated. Rather, it was as if the concept of river had been partially erased from reality, leaving behind this ghostly impression. Detective Sine, a woman, approached him, her white lab coat nearly indistinguishable from the colorless landscape. Dr. Eliza Tanner, the city's leading physicist, had been studying the phenomenon since its first appearance 3 months ago. "The process is accelerating," she said without preamble. "We've been measuring the dimensional collapse, and what took weeks in the beginning is now happening in days." "How long?" Sine asked. "Until complete two-dimensionality? For the entire planet?" She shrugged, the gesture oddly truncated, as if her shoulders couldn't quite complete their full range of motion. "At the current rate? 2 weeks, maybe less." Sine swallowed. "And then what?" "I don't know," Dr. Tanner admitted. "But I found something you should see." The university's rare book collection had been moved to a secure facility once the libraries began to empty. Dr. Tanner led Sine through rows of glass cases containing ancient texts, their pages increasingly blank as the phenomenon progressed. "Most of our oldest manuscripts are already gone," she explained. "But this one is different." She stopped before a small display containing what appeared to be a journal bound in matte black leather. Unlike the other books, whose pages had turned a uniform white, this one's text remained stubbornly visible, though the letters seemed to shift and rearrange themselves whenever Sane tried to focus on them. "It's resisting the effect," Dr. Tanner said. "And more importantly, it appeared in our collection the day the river began to fade. No record of acquisition, no catalog entry. It was simply there." Sine leaned closer. "Can you translate it?" "Portions. It appears to be a record kept by something called the Society of Final Memory. From what I can decipher, they were an ancient order dedicated to preserving knowledge through catastrophic events." "Preserving knowledge? But everything's being erased." Dr. Tanner's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. A gesture Sine noticed seemed less three-dimensional than it should have been. "I think they made a mistake," she whispered. "A terrible one." The journal led them to the underground chambers, beneath the old cathedral. Sign had never known these catacombs existed, though they appeared to have been built centuries before the church itself. The society maintained outposts throughout the world, Dr. Tanner explained, as they descended the narrow stairs, flashlight beams cutting through dust that hung motionless in the air. According to the journal, they believed humanity was cyclical, civilizations rising and falling in patterns, with crucial knowledge lost in each collapse. So they preserved information across these cycles? Sign asked, ducking beneath a low archway. The stone felt wrong beneath his fingers, too smooth, as if the grain and texture were being slowly erased. Yes, but more than that, they developed a method to intentionally reset civilization if they deemed it necessary, a way to erase dangerous knowledge while preserving what they considered essential wisdom. The stairway opened into a vast circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal holding what appeared to be an obsidian sphere, the only object Soin had seen in weeks that still possessed a sense of depth and dimension. Surrounding it, slumped against the walls and floor, were desiccated bodies, or rather, what remained of them. They resembled paper cutouts more than corpses, flattened and colorless. The last active members of the society, Dr. Tanner murmured. They activated the device, the mnemonic purge, they called it. But something went wrong. Sign approached the sphere cautiously. Unlike everything else in this fading world, it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A perfect three-dimensional void amid the increasingly two-dimensional reality. The journal says the purge was meant to be selective, Dr. Tanner continued, her voice growing thinner, less substantial. To remove specific knowledge while leaving the fundamental structure of reality intact. But they miscalculated. Instead of erasing dangerous information, they started erasing the fundamental properties of existence: dimension, color, substance. And now it's spreading like a contagion throughout reality. Sign reached toward the sphere, feeling a strange pull. Can it be reversed? The journal wasn't clear, but Dr. Tanner's words cut off abruptly. Sign turned to find her frozen in place, her form suddenly flat against the wall, like a photograph. Her mouth was open in mid-sentence, but no sound emerged. Before his eyes, her image seemed to lose resolution, details blurring until she resembled a rough sketch more than a person. Dr. Tanner! He reached for her, but his hand passed through where her shoulder should have been. She wasn't just flat. She was becoming insubstantial. Sign turned back to the sphere in horror. The loss of dimensionality was accelerating. He could feel it in his own body, his lungs laboring to expand in 3 dimensions when reality only permitted 2. His vision narrowing as his eyeballs flattened into circles. The journal had described the purge as a reset, a way to begin civilization anew. But this wasn't renewal. This was erasure. With the last of his dimensional strength, Sane grasped the obsidian sphere. It burned cold against his palms, the sensation almost nostalgic, a reminder of when touch had depth and texture. If the society had started this, perhaps their tool could end it. The sphere pulsed beneath his touch, and Sane had the distinct sensation of something ancient and aware turning its attention toward him. Not a machine, but an entity, a consciousness that had been waiting, perhaps for centuries, for someone to recognize the terrible mistake. "You understand," a voice whispered directly into his mind. The cycle was corrupted, the purge incomplete. "How do I stop it?" Sane gasped, feeling his vocal cords flattening, his words becoming as thin as paper. The purge cannot be stopped, but it can be completed correctly. The sphere began to glow with an impossible light. Not white, or any color Sine could name, but something that suggested all colors at once, dimensions beyond the three he knew. "Choose what remains," the voice commanded. "What essence of your world must survive to build anew?" Sine understood then. The society hadn't intended to destroy reality, but to curate it, to select which elements would survive the transition to the next cycle. Their failure had been one of judgment, not mechanism. As his consciousness expanded into the sphere, Sane saw the entirety of his fading world. Every person, place, and memory collapsing into flatness. And beyond that, he glimpsed other worlds, other cycles, stretching back through countless iterations of humanity. With his final three-dimensional thought, Sane made his choice. "Hey, Jimmy, you still reading that comic?" Mrs. Abernathy called from behind the drugstore counter. "Those new Detective Sane stories are all black and white. Now that the war's on, not much to look at." 12-year-old Jimmy Marshall didn't look up from the final panels of Detective Sane and the Mystery of the Vanishing World. He traced his finger over the stark black and white illustrations, the flattened city, the mysterious sphere, the hero's final choice. "I don't mind, Mrs. Abernathy," he replied. "The story's better than the colors, anyway." He turned to the last page, where Detective Sine stood before a newly dimensional world. Color bleeding back into the edges of the panel as rivers began to flow again, and people regained their solid forms. The final caption read, "And so Sine chose to preserve not knowledge or power, but the capacity for dimension itself, the ability to grow, to change, to become more than flat impressions on a finite page." Jimmy closed the comic carefully. Outside the shop window, a military convoy rumbled past, headed for the docks and then across the Atlantic. The world was at war, resources were scarce, and luxuries like colored ink for comics were among the first casualties on the home front. But as he stepped outside into the April sunshine, Jimmy couldn't help seeing the world a little differently, noticing the subtle depths and dimensions that existed even in the harshest of times, the colors that persisted even when they couldn't be printed on a page. He tucked the comic securely under his arm and headed home, unaware that in his hands he carried one of the last remaining artifacts of a civilization that had faded not once, but countless times before. Each cycle preserved paradoxically within the flat, two-dimensional pages of a story that refused to be forgotten.